Okay, dear friends, let's get back in. We are discussing Avraham Avinu. Books out, phones away. WhatsApp doesn't work anyway. What's the difference? You have nothing to do with that. Okay, come take a seat. Remind me later, I need to put you down for attendance. We have a big class. We are discussing Avraham Avinu. That's a good start. We'll try that again. Aha! Here we go. We're discussing Avraham and Sarah. Avraham and Sarah. And we describe them as being not really, we call them the first Jews, we said, but not necessarily, because Judaism began giving of the Torah, which is going to be like 1,000 years after this event. Okay, we're in about the year 1948 with the birth of Avraham Avinu, and in the Jewish year 2448, which we described already, we discussed this, is going to be really the key year to everything we're going to be discussing this semester. 1 year you have to remember. There'll be many dates within the year you're going to have to remember, but 1 year to remember, that's 2448, but we're way before that. So Judaism, as we know it today, did not exist. Now there were mitzvot that did exist at this time. Let's just finish off one last piece, which we didn't finish, I think, last class on page 5. We spoke about the tests that Avraham Avinu went through. How many tests did Avraham have? 10. Did we discuss the number 10 at all?
Yeah.
We did. Oh, great. We did finish off. I feel good. Okay, and the 10th test was? Not all at once. The Akedat Yitzchak, which we spoke about a little bit, and we'll speak about that more when we talk about Avodah Zarah, idol worship. Not American idol worship, but idol worship in general. Okay, so let's turn to page 6. Let's begin a new aspect, because you'll notice that the Torah begins not with mitzvot, but it begins with people. Actually, it begins with the creation of the world. But there's not much there, is there? How many verses are there with the creation of the world? I don't know, 20 or something. But very quickly we see that the Torah is all about people. The Torah is all about people and their decisions. Not about events, but about people. So very quickly after describing the creation of the universe, the world, and everything, we get to talk about people and their decisions. We have Adam and Chava, but we're not going to speak about too much this semester. And we talk about Cain and Abel, and then very quickly we get to Avraham Avinu. Now, Avraham Avinu lived 10 generations after Noah. We're not going to speak much about Noah because there's not too much for this semester we can discuss about Noah. There's a lot to talk about him. And Noah turned up 10 generations. So we have Adam, and then we go 10 generations to Noah, and then we go 10 generations to Avraham. That's the course of events. So we're very quickly talking about people and their decisions. And Avraham, the Torah stops and says, we found someone very important. Avraham Avinu is going to act and do things that are going to have major implications for the world, the Jewish people, and the world in general. Yeah.
So I know that Noah lived while Abraham was alive.
Yes, there was an overlap.
Right. So does that also mean that Abraham lived while Noah was alive?
Yeah.
Oh,
There was an overlap with individuals. However, remember, we spoke about last semester how the time of Avraham Avinu, if you remember correctly, the world was full of Avodah Zarah. It was all idol worship. Hi. Okay, you in this class?
Yes.
Okay, are you signed up for this class?
Yes.
What's your name?
Deborah.
Yeah, you're in this class. Take a seat. Okay. Come up to me later and I'll fill you in. We have a big class, Baruch Hashem. Okay. So Avraham Avinu, the Torah stops and starts to discuss him because he has a lot to tell us. Yeah.
If you live 10 generations apart, how do they both lie at the same
They were alive for a long time as individuals. That's how it was before the Mabul. It could be actually generations that we're describing over here, but there was some kind of overlap that existed between them. Some say it's just their teachings. Okay? So let's get to Avraham Avinu, because there is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that tells us something very important about Jewish thought, and that is the world stands. So we're going to take this piece of information and we're going to download it onto Avraham Avinu in a moment. Hold on. World stands on 3 pillars. Okay? So let's just take this information. Hi, come, take a seat. The world stands on 3 pillars. Al shalosha devarim. On 3 things. Let's see it over here if you want. Ha'olam omed. The world stands. Al. What are these 3 things that the Mishnah wants us to tell us the world stands on? 1. Torah. Follow carefully, my friends. 2. Avodah. And 3, what's number 3? Gimulot Hasadim. Acts of kindness. The world stands on these 3 things. Okay? At this point of Avraham Avinu, is there a Torah? Has the Torah been given yet? I'm going to try that again. Has the Torah been given yet? No. You shout it out. Don't be shy. This is not Zoom. I'm actually here. This is actually live, this class. Avodah. What's avodah? What's avodah, yeah? Prayer. You see, the word avodah means work. That's the literal translation of it, work. But in this context, we see the word avodah refers to tefillah, prayer. Prayer. Avodah, as we refer to prayer as avodah shel halev, work of the heart. Now, we're going to talk about prayer later on this semester, but I'm going to just mention it now. Avodah is a code word for prayer. There's other code words for prayer, but this is a very important one. Does prayer exist at this time? Does prayer exist? I don't mean at this time now, 2021. Does prayer exist at the time of Avraham? Did Avraham Avinu pray?
Yes.
Of course he did. We see the Torah is full of it. Did Noach pray? Yeah. Did Adam and Rishon pray? Yeah, everyone's praying. So this exists. What about number 3? Do acts of kindness exist? Do acts of kindness exist? 1000%. Because Avraham Avinu and his wife Sarah have one core midah. These are very important words. Remember, every Hebrew word on the board you have to write down and know the translation too. It's going to help you for your midterms. Midah. What does the word midah mean? This, actually, next semester, we're going to spend an entire semester on this one word, actually. Yeah, Ronnie, what does it mean?
Morals.
Character traits. But yeah, morals will fall into that too. Yeah, character traits. It literally means a measurement. The word midah means a measurement. Like this table has a midah, right? Your height is a midah, right? 6'2", or if you're Jewish, male, 5'2", you know? So midah means a measurement. But in this context, it also means a character trait. Why the word midah means both a measurement and a character trait? Because how do you measure up as a person means how you act towards other people. So it fits, yeah? You get that? Sure. The word for character traits is midah. Happens to be the same word midah in the singular. Midot also means a measurement. Why would the same word mean a measurement and a character? Because how do you measure? In English it works too. How do you measure up? Right? How do you measure a person? Not by their height, right, or their weight, but their character. So the word midah means character because that's your measure. How do we measure a person? By how they act towards other people. Where do we learn this out from? Avraham. What was Avraham's main midah? What was his main that he perfected? And we learn from chesed. 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 The act of loving kindness. So Avraham Avinu, according to Kabbalah, he did have a form of Torah. We don't know what that means though. Avodah, prayer he had. And this he became an expert in. And the Torah is going to spend a lot of time, like a vast amount of time, describing Avraham Avinu and all the nice stuff he does towards other people. It's interesting. The Torah didn't begin with a list of mitzvot, keep Shabbat, and keep kosher. It didn't start like that. Or create a calendar, or Jewish holidays. It starts with stories about people, good decisions, and bad decisions. We have a question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, was it Avraham that always kept his tent open and
Yes, we're going to talk about that. That's going to be a major aspect of Avraham Avinu. Avraham and his ohels, all part of this. We discussed that he lived in a tent, an ohel, because he was moving around so he could bring people close to God. This is the method. Listen very carefully. We spoke about how Avraham Avinu made his life mission to spread God, ethical monotheism. He escaped from Avodah Zarah. This, hello, is how he did it. Acts of kindness. This was his methodology. He could have put a gun to people's heads and said, you better believe in my God. I mean, people have done that through history, right? Haven't they? They've tried to do it to us. Right? They burned us and killed us and threw us out. And we're like, nah, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way. It may work. It does work. Putting a gun to someone's head and saying, you better believe in my God, or I'm going to kill you. It does work. But it's a temporary result. The Jewish way we learn from Avraham Avinu, from the beginning of the Torah, is chesed, kindness. And we're going to see later on, the rabbis say the Torah is darchea darchei noam. When you teach Torah, it has to be nice and calm, and it has to be a acceptable thing. People have to understand it and want to learn it. Okay? That's how we know. By the way, we actually learn that concept. I'll just mention it's a side point. I know there's a lot I'm throwing you right now. But this point is a side point. One of the most popular or common pesukim, verses in the Torah is Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor. You've heard that before, right? And God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu saying. Now there's two words for speech, daber and omer. Both are mentioned. Why? Just say God spoke to Moses. Why saying? Why they put daber and omer? Both the ways of speaking. Daber, says Rashi, is lashon kasha. It's hard. When Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, God gave it to him hard. Daber, you better know this. But when Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to the Jewish people, God said to him, do it omer. Omer is a nice way of speaking. Soft. Even the word that daber is lashon kasha. It's hard. Amar, nice, sweet, give it over. It's important. You have to know that this is a key to who we are as a people. But it needs amirah. So Avraham Avinu spread belief in God. There is no Judaism. There's no Torah. We said it doesn't exist yet. It's going to. He's getting the ball rolling. But before we get here, we have this and this. Because if you don't have this and this, you can't get this. Can you see the order? So it's boom, boom, boom. Are you following? Any questions? Am I downloading some key information into your heads? Yeah.
Just to make sure, the year 2448, is that when we got this?
That's the year the Torah was given. I mentioned as we're not there yet. All right, we're in the 1940s over here. The Jewish 1940s, not the secular 1940s. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, my friends. So now we have that. Okay. This is a class for questions, by the way. So I'm really, really serious. The other class is going to go much faster. So enjoy it while you can. Ronnie, hit me.
Would you say that the Torah didn't start with people?
Yeah, so you'll see the Torah doesn't begin with mitzvot. It's actually a question of Rashi. Rashi says, why did the Torah begin listing the mitzvot? What is the Torah? We're not even there yet. The Torah is a list of laws, right? Torah, hora'ah, teachings. So then begin the Torah with the mitzvot. And instead there's all these stories of Adam and Cain and Hevel and Noach and Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. What are they doing here? Why do we start that's a very famous question of Rashi. He answers, Ronnie, and says, because before you get to the giving of the Torah, we're going to have to learn how to act. Right? Ein derech eretz and Torah. So these stories of Avraham Avinu and all the other people are not just like cute stories. They're like, this is the preparation that was needed. If we haven't downloaded this, we're not going to get the Torah. Actually, according to Maimonides, the Rambam, I don't know why this Rambam I'm not discussing yeshiva. I didn't know this Rambam when I was in yeshiva, unfortunately. He says that actually the entire Torah, he says this in the laws of Tumurah, interestingly. In Mishnah Torah, remember that book we spoke about, he wrote with all the laws? He says, what's the reason for all the Torah of the Mitzvot? In order to make us into nice people. Isn't that crazy? What a Rambam. What a Rambam. What is the purpose? By the way, a lot of yeshiva boys and girls who were spending their entire lives in yeshiva, which most of you did not, do not know this famous Rambam. If someone says, what's the point of Judaism? What's the point of Torah mitzvot? Oh, what are you doing this whole thing? But become a better person. It's not me, I'm just quoting the Rambam. Don't shoot the messenger. No, seriously, don't shoot the messenger. Okay? That's what the Rambam says. We'll see that Rambam another time. Inside. Okay. So let's have a look at the Torah's lengthy description of an event that happened in Abraham's life. Remember, you can learn a Jewish law from one verse or one word or one letter. And yet the Torah gives you this lengthy dialogue and narrative about things that Avraham did with his wife and his kids, we'll see. His kids are a major part of that, by the way. So let's go. Let's have a look at a story about Avraham Avinu. You've all heard the story before, who was visited by 3 strangers. Okay? And let's have a look inside. So Avraham Avinu, we mentioned last class, I believe, had a Brit Milah at a very old age. And he was recovering from that Brit Milah. Looks like it was on page 6. And he was living, remember, he was always moving around. He stopped and lived on what's called the Elonei Mamre. Mamre, the plains of Mamre. What's Mamre? It's actually a person. There was this man who lived with Avraham. He said, Avraham, you're such a great person. I want you to please live on my land for a short amount of time, because you're going to bring blessing to my land. You're going to do mitzvah and do good things. So do me a favor, please live on my land. So he's mentioned in the Torah. Isn't that cool? How cool would that be? Just get your name, getting a mention in the Torah because you gave your land rent-free to Avraham Avinu. I mean, maybe Avraham paid for it. He didn't like free stuff. We know that for sure elsewhere. But anyway, leave that aside. I like free stuff. But okay, fine. V'yara elav Hashem. So God appeared to Avraham, the Elonei Mamre, in this plains of Mamre. V'hu Yoshev. Now Avraham, so let's just go through this piece by piece. 1, he had a Brit. When I say Brit, I mean a British person. I mean a Brit Milah. Number 1, he just had a Brit Milah. Why? That's going to be very important. This Brit Milah, we're going to see, is going to allow him to go to Israel. Okay? It's connected. It's a whole discussion, not for now, but it's connected. He needs this Brit Milah in order to fulfill the next part of his mission in life, which was to go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay? But we'll get to that another time. Brit Milah means it's a physical circumcision, but it's a promise. A Brit Milah, a Brit. The word Brit actually means a promise. But a strong one, not like promise to see you tomorrow, like something that must happen and will happen. It's a Brit, it's a pact. It's a pact between 2 people, a promise to 2 people. With a Brit Milah, it's between Avraham and God. Okay, come back to that. Number 2, where's he sitting? The Torah even tells us where's he sitting. At the entrance to his tent. Why do I care where Avraham is sitting? He's sitting on the tent. He's sitting in the tent. Why do I need to know that this is his tent? Right? There's his nice, beautiful tent. And he's sitting right there. The Torah mentions information. It's important. Every word, every letter of the Torah is there for a reason. Nothing extra. That's a very important idea. So he's sitting, sorry, I missed the word. He's sitting at the entrance to his tent. I mean, for some reason that's important information. Let's keep going. We're going to answer these questions. And the Torah tells us, in the heat of the day, it was a very hot day. I need to know the weather. Suddenly, the Torah is AccuWeather. It's a weather app. Why do I care about the weather? Well, later on, when the Torah was given, it was a warm day. I mean, we know it was cloudy because there were clouds around the mountain. Right now, we know. But why do we need to talk about the weather? Okay, so that's obviously important, and we're going to see. Then it says that Avraham, this is one of my favorite verses, I had a great teacher many years ago who spoke a lot about this, lifted his eyes. Avraham lifted his eyes and saw. Now, we're going to have to figure this out. He lifted his eyes. How else are you going to see something without lifting your eyes? Right? Look at the words. V'yisa enav v'yar. He lifted his eyes and saw. Now, when you read that, you're like, oh, he's just talking biblically. But no. If it tells me that, there's some very important, pertinent information the Torah is trying to give me. I don't like to guess what it is right now. I can't resist. Why is the Torah telling me he lifted his eyes? Just say, and he saw 3 people. He's about to see 3 people passing by, and he's going to invite them in. So as you're in the end of the story, that's what's going to happen. Why doesn't it tell me he lifted his eyes and he saw? You can answer. He lifted his eyes and he saw 3 people. Yeah.
Maybe he was just like resting. He's like after a big procedure, it's hot out.
If he was resting, where would he be?
Maybe he was trying, he wanted to sit at the entrance of the tent. He was like, well,
Why would he sit at the entrance of the tent if he's resting?
like, I don't think he was intentionally resting. Like maybe he was just.
If he's resting after this big operation, where would he be? And it's a really hot day. Where would you be? Inside or outside?
Yeah, I'm not saying his intention was to be sleeping. I'm saying it's a very hot day.
He wasn't resting. I disagree. I don't think he was. I don't think he was. I think the fact is that his entrance to his tent means if it was inside his tent, say the rabbis, that would show that he's trying to recover from an operation. That's where the shade is. But it says he's outside. He's outside. What does outside the tent mean?
He's looking for guests.
He's looking to do something. He's looking to do something. It's a really hot day, I know. But I'm outside my tent, I'm looking to do something. Now plug in this. He lifted his eyes and he saw. He saw people, but why do I need the double lashon? The double language of he lifted his eyes and he saw. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, go on.
Because Hashem said.
At this point he didn't. At this point he did not know God had sent him these 3 people. Absolutely not. He did not know that.
Maybe because he wanted to talk.
Did he want to talk to him? He wanted a little conversation?
No, by the rule.
So why does it have to say he's... Because there's 2 things happening here. Listen carefully, my dear friends and students. One thing is seeing. We all see stuff. The yar, and then he... It's like we say in English. I see what I need to do. When you see what you need to do, I just do it. No. I understand. He understood that he had to bring these 3 people into his tent. You see, many people see stuff and do nothing about it. We're learning from this one story that you see something and then you realize that action needs to happen. And Avraham, we know, is a man, and his wife Sarah is a woman of action. Yeah? So he's at his tent, although it's very hot and he's in a lot of pain. He just had a Brit Milah. It's actually 3 days after the Brit Milah, right? So now is the most painful time. And he sits there because he's like, the pain of not having guests is worse than recovering from his operation. Are you with me? Yeah, we making sense of here? Okay. So he lifts up his eyes and he's like, yeah, oh, I know what I need to do. So what does he do? Remember, he's very rich and very, very famous, and he's very old. And yeah, look what he does. Look at this. Look at this Jew over here. He jumps up, likratam, v'ishtachlas, and he bows down to them. What are you bowing down to them for? These are 3 random travelers. Oh, no. I got work to do. Very humble individual. We speak of the humility of Avraham Avinu. We'll talk about that meter, that trait another time. Very important. But Yomer, Imna. Imna is a very nice way of speaking. Please. If you have any mercy upon me, do me a favor. They're schwitzing. It's really hot outside. Actually, Rashi tells us that God brought out the sun to be super hot so that Avram wouldn't be interrupted by guests because he wanted him to recover. And Avram was like, nah, don't worry about that. I'm still going to do it. Imagine that. And he says, please do me a favor. Al na tavor mi al avdecha. He calls himself a servant of theirs. He calls himself a servant. He's not a servant. He's the great Avraham Avinu, most famous person in the entire world. This is like, the president going out, bowing down, saying, please come inside. No, you get caught. No. He had many servants, many slaves. He had many people who were working for him, who were treated very well, by the way. Look at Rashi, Rabbi Shlomi Yitzhaki, about 1,000 years ago, and he fills in some of the interpretations we are thinking about today. Kahom hayom, it was a really hot day. Hotzia Kadosh Baruch Hu chama. God made it a hot day, deliberately. That's why it's mentioned. Otherwise, why are we mentioning the weather? Right? Machpatlan, why do we care? Menatika shalola tricha. He didn't want Avram to be busy with all these guests. He's like, just take a day off. Take a day off. Ain't no day from chesed. We all were very good at taking days off. We just took a whole month off. But Avraham Avinu was like, no, I got stuff to do. So God did him a favor and realized, it ain't working. So then what did God do? He said, what want to do with this guy? We need to get him back in the tent. So he brought him 3 different opinions. One opinion is, which Rashi goes with, he brought him 3 angels in the disguise as humans. 3 angels, 3 malachim came to Avraham just so he could do something. Now, there's a difference. Some say he knew they were angels, but mostly he didn't know. Mostly he did not know they were angels. He thought they're regular people because they were dressed up. Right? We have a concept that angels are sometimes given a levush, a garb, in order to get stuff done. You may be walking around the streets of Manhattan and you think it's a person standing next to you, maybe an angel dressed as a human. Maybe right here today there's an angel dressed as... Who knows? If you were, you'd never admit, would you? If you are, see me later. I have a few things to ask you. That's okay. Not the only time this happened, by the way. Right? Not the only time this happens. Okay, fine. He brought angels to Avraham in the form of humans. So Avraham would not know. So now we see that Avraham Avinu is really, really into chesed. He's like, this is the way we're going to spread God in the world. This is the way, because remember, that's his mission. Remember that, to get rid of Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah was the opposite. Avodah Zarah was killing people, right? Using their blood, killing children. That's what they were about. Avraham was like, no. You're not going to die for God. You're going to live for God. Okay. Let's look at the bottom source. This is a midrash. A midrash is a story that was written down. Some of them appear in the Gemara as well, but this is slightly lower. And the midrash tells us that Avraham used hospitality to passers-by. He would feed them. He would give them food. And by the way, we actually even know the menu he served these guests. So the food aspect is important, right? Before you want to persuade someone to do something, it's like when your father comes home, right? Your mother comes home, you're like, let them eat first before you ask for stuff. I'm like, kids, just let mum have her food first, Imma, let her have her food first, and then you can ask her. Don't ask your parents for anything on an empty stomach, right? Same thing, Avraham taught us that. First of all, feed the guests, and then he would speak to them, and he would teach the blessings. He would say, by the way, you know where this food came from? It came from God. Really? Yeah, the creator of the universe. And he would get into a whole intellectual discussion with them. By the way, we're told in different ways. Some people he would talk to, if they were young children, one way. And he would talk to old people another way. And smart people, stupid people. People come in all shapes and sizes and brain abilities. And he would speak to each one of them on their level, which we discussed. Remember that when we first started the semester, he spoke to everyone in their own way. Yeah.
What language is
It's a good question. Good question. Hebrew, we're going to see later on, existed. Because it was the language that God created the world with. So Avraham knew Hebrew, knew the letters. How he conversed with these people was in their own language. It was in their own language. Because he lived there. This is, modern day Iraq, right? Where we are right now.
Avraham learned language? Like,
Yeah, he knew the language, sure. He lived in their society, their towns. But he knew Hebrew. Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, we'll see, we'll do a whole class just on Hebrew and why it's so important from a spiritual perspective. We'll see why it's really important that Hebrew was known at this time. Because it was the language God created the world with. I'm going to come back to that another time. I'm going to have to shelve that, but please remind me to come back to that. I have some really key information that could change the way you look at the language of Hebrew in the future. So he's inviting them in, and he's feeding them, and he says, right, now we've got to bless God. Really? Yeah, which God? The God who created the heavens universe. Look at that God. We got tons of gods. No, that's your mistake. You're talking God small g. Alright? I'm talking God big G. Or OG, you know what I'm saying? Okay? And he said, let's bless God and thank him for what we have. And that was his methodology of spreading ethical monism that we spoke about. His children and grandson did not follow the same way. There's not one way to do things. I mean, everyone's got to do some chesed. But this was Abraham's. He's chesed. That's who he is, Mr. Chesed. And that's why it says in the Gemara, on page 7, when we comfort mourners, we say, may you, God, bestow kindness, the children of those who bestow kindness, in the way of Avraham Avinu. So Avraham is known in our prayers as Mr. Kindness, doing acts of kindness towards people. That's how he's known. That's how he's understood. Okay? That's how he's understood. As introducing kindness into the world. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's go a little bit deeper. Any question that you do discuss these four? We discussed them, right? It's all here. Okay? Okay. So we're still not ready to get rid of this because this year does not exist yet. Right? You know, that year does not exist yet. Okay? We're building up to that. Everything that's happening in the Torah is preparing us for Torah. Acts of kindness, prayer, and Torah is coming. Okay? There's a pattern over here. But we're not there yet. We're going to have to wait some time. And we'll see why the Torah, I mean, the question is, why didn't God just give the Torah to Avraham? It's a fair question, right? Why didn't God give the Torah to Avraham Avinu, all the Mitzvah? The answer to that question is, like, really important. I'll give it the answer, and I'll explain the answer another time. The Torah could not be given to one person. It had to be given to an entire nation. Why that statement is so important, we'll see later on. Okay, back to our topic. It says in the Mishnah, Kol mi sheyesh biyado shloshin dvar elu. Whoever has these three things, you are a student of Avraham. You have these three things, you're a student of Avraham. What are these three things? Let's go through them. Okay. Number one, by the way, we are in Parashat Noach this week. Okay, and next week we're going to start talking about Avraham Avinu. So this is all fitting in very nicely into the Torah cycle of readings that we happen to be doing anyway, which is a coincidence. You become a student of Abraham. You're a student of Abraham. I never met him before. How can you be called a student of Abraham? What's that about? So you don't need to meet Avraham in order to learn from him, right? There's lots of people in history we never met, and we still learn from them. Avraham Avinu, we're told, if you follow these three things, you are considered a student of Abraham. That's what the Mishnah says, read black and white. Number one, ayin tova, a good eye. Ayin tova, a good eye. Really? What's the opposite of a good eye? Of an ayin tova? Ayin, dayin hara, an evil eye. That's interesting. So Avraham is all about ayin tova. You've heard of the ayin hara? Alright? Avraham is the opposite. What does the ayin hara do? someone gives an ayin hara or receives an ayin hara, what's happening to them? It's much more than bad luck. It's jealousy, and it's potentially taking away other people's things and blessings. It's reducing what other people have. How it works is a great discussion, which we can talk about another time. There's a lot to say on this. But ayin hara takes things away from other people. So ayin tova, which is the opposite, is going to bring blessings, increase the things of other people. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna ask because like I've heard like with religious family and stuff say that like the evil eye isn't true, or like it's only as true as like you believe in it. Like, does that make sense?
There's a lot to say. The Gemara does say that. However, ayin hara is a real thing.
Okay.
It's spoken about, right? Even Rashi mentions it, so it's not just a Kabbalistic concept. What the ayin hara actually is, in short, I'll just mention it. You may not understand this, but I'll just mention it. It's really negative prayer. People have jealousy of other people, and they pray negatively of why that person has that thing, wishing bad upon other people, because it comes from jealousy. Bilam is compared to Avraham. Bilam, who's a character in the Torah, a non-Jewish prophet of God, a non-Jewish prophet, he had ayin hara, he had tzurat ayin. He was jealous and acted upon his jealousy and tried to take away good stuff from the Jewish people. Avraham is the opposite. He's ayin tova. He has good, he's got an open eye, and he's happy for other people. So that's ayin tova. Happy for other people and wants to do good for other people. He wants to do tov. Tov, yeah? Boop. He wants to do tov. He wants to help and bring goodness to other people. And he starts by spreading the information of God. Yeah, hand up over there, Miss Hamsani.
Yeah, isn't ayin hara like then a curse, basically?
It's not a curse. It's a person. I'll give you the quick definition. It's one person being jealous of someone else and praying to God, whether they realize it or not, that person should not have that stuff. And then an account book is open, heaven forbid, chas v'chalila, against that person, saying, maybe the person does not deserve that thing, and that thing is potentially taken away.
How do you get rid of it?
How do you what?
Get rid of it.
That's a very, very good question.
Can you?
You can, absolutely you can. You can protect yourself against ayin hara, sure. By taking all the blessings you have and using for the good, so that when the book is open, it's like, that person deserves that thing, right? Praying good, staying away from people who are negative and are jealous of you, if possible, not flaunting all the good stuff that you have in people's faces, to being humble. Everything we know about Avraham Avinu, he's the opposite. Whatever he did, he got to keep his stuff. Avraham got to keep his stuff and use it, and use all the blessings you have for good. Avraham used all his blessings for good. So if anyone tried to give an ayin hara, he's like, hello, all my stuff is not mine, I'm using it for the good anyway. I'm using it for bracha, not klala. Yeah.
Like, doesn't ayin hara not exist if you don't like believe it, like you don't care what someone thinks about you in a certain sense?
In a certain sense, but a person can still be affected by it. A person can still be affected by it. That's more dreams. But ayin hara is there, and people have to be cautious how they act. That's another discussion. Yeah. We'll get to dreams another time.
This like worded away.
No, sorry. Under the red pintle, yeah. I used to wear one of those when I was a kid, yeah. No, there's no really any sources. There's some Kabbalistic sources that a chut of red, we know the color red is neged ayin hara. The only thing I've ever seen, because I did a lot of research into this, is a ruby for a baby.
Wait, what is she talking?
Yeah, that is mentioned.
Red bracelet.
A ruby, yeah. A ruby. They say wearing a ruby when a person's pregnant wards off ayin hara. There's a real source for that. But wearing a red bracelet on your hand, sorry. Sorry. The eye, well, that's about why wearing an eye doesn't do anything either. But you know what? When people wear, how do we get onto this? People are amazing. What people are interested in. What is that eye you see in people's bracelets? What is it? Whose eye is it? Why are you wearing an eyeball? Why is everyone wearing eyeballs on the necklaces? No, seriously, why are you wearing an eyeball? Why are you wearing an eyeball? Whose eye is it? Whose eye is it? Why are you wearing an eye? Because it's all trendy, because it was on sale at Forever 21 or something. I don't know. Having 4 daughters, I know about these stores. Yeah. What's with this eyeball? It's an eye of a creature. What creature is it?
Fish.
Fish. Very good. Doug. B'yid gu l'rov, says Yaakov to his children. You should be plentiful like the fish. Fish are not affected by Ayin Hara. That's why they survived the flood of Noah. Fish were not affected by Ayin Hara. They were hid because they're hidden from the eye. Right? They're mammals that don't create sound. They're quiet. Shh. They have blessings. They keep mouths shut.
Why are so many people denying believing in?
Because you don't have to believe in it. It's optional. You don't believe in it. It's not a principle of our faith. It's like reincarnation.
So some
It's like
people are
yoga.
like forcing themselves not to.
That's fine. They don't have to believe in it. It's not a principle of our faith. You're still a believing Jew without believing in Ayin Hara. You don't have to believe in it. It's mentioned. It's like reincarnation. You don't have to believe in it. If you want to, that's fine. Happens to be that most people, even Rashi talks about it, so it's not a weird Kabbalistic concept. But whatever it is, the Maharal says it's all about negativity. Let's bring it back. And Avraham is Ayin Tovah. So what's the opposite of Ayin Hara? Wanting good for other people, helping them, acts of kindness. You do that, no Ayin Hara. Makes sense, right? I'm just giving you, it's pure logic based on what we're describing over here. Number 2. What else does Avraham Avinu have? He has a Ruach Nemucha, which we can translate as a humble demeanor. He was humble. He had humility. Humility. What's humility, since we're describing it? In Hebrew it's called anivut, anava, humble. He had a good eye and he had humility, ruach nemucha, a low spirit.
Can you spell that?
Sure. Let's do it.
What does that say next to humble?
Ruach nemucha. Ruach nemucha. He had a low spirit. A low spirit. Anava. He was humble. He was an anav. He was humble. Why is that important? What's the opposite of humble? What's the opposite? What's the opposite? The opposite of this we said is Ayin Hara. What's the opposite of this? What's the opposite of humility? Give me an English word. You got a big ego. Ga'ava. Ga'ava. You have a big ego. Balaam had a big ego. Big ego is it's all about me. If you don't need God, all the success I have is because of me. All my failures, because of you. Avraham wasn't like that. Any success he had, he ascribed to God. He was a humble person. These are all key traits. Key traits to be a student of Avraham Avinu. You want the Torah? We've got to try to work on these. All the goodness in my life, that's because Hashem, God gave it to me. Yeah, I'm very smart. I'm brilliant. I'm a great doctor, lawyer, business person, mother, father, because God gave me a great blessing. That's humility isn't low self-esteem, by the way. Humility is not low self-esteem. Humble, demeanor, humility. Ruach nemucha. Okay? Number 2. Number 3, nefesh shefela, which we're going to translate as he was not very demanding, undemanding soul. He didn't demand a lot of things from other people, for himself. Undemanding soul. Nefesh shefela. Let's have a look at one of the commentators. The commentator is going to translate these 3 or explain these 3. These are opposite over here. Would be a demanding soul. Demanding soul. Let's have a look. Says the Bartanura, one of the commentators, Ayin Tovah, a good eye means a person who's satisfied with his possessions and doesn't crave money of others. He didn't want what other people had. He didn't say, oh, why do they get that? It's not fair. Why can't I get that? That's Ayin Hara. He's like, whatever God gives me is a blessing. You have to be very, very, very wealthy. Extremely wealthy. And yet he didn't crave more and more and more and more and more. All his resources he used to spread God. That's what he used his resources for. And we see that after a certain war that he found himself in, he had a chance to take a lot of money from the army that was defeated Avraham. Didn't take it. Not even a shoelace, the Torah tells us. Not even a shoelace. What is humble? He had great humility. He says, what am I? Anochi efev efev. I'm just dust and ashes. I'm just a person like everyone else. And now remember, great people who were very wealthy, very powerful, were making themselves into gods. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that. This was very, very common. Still is, actually. All right? Look at North Korea. Right? Still people who become very, very powerful and very wealthy, and they're like, well, obviously I'm a god. Paro did it later on. Nimrod started to do that. Kim Jong-un. I mean, everyone's up to it. They all make themselves into gods. Okay? Not just like, literally make themselves into gods. And Judaism is like, no, you're not a god. There's only one God. Right? No human can become God. I'll say that again. No human can become God. Although there is a very large religion out there that believes that, we do not. That is the antithesis to everything we're describing. Number 3, when we're trying to figure out who Avraham is. That's our goal. Torah's got a lot to say about it. Stories, Gemara, Midrashim. Undemanding soul. He had control over his desires. Now that's tough. Okay? And the way he treated his wife, the way he treated other people. Remember, rich, powerful people of those days used to use other people as slaves, women and men as pleasure beings. Avraham not. He saw a neshama, a soul in every person, and treated them that way. This may sound obvious to you, but back then, who was doing that? No one was doing that. Right? We know the famous story of Avraham and Saddam and Amorah. Right? Sodom and Amorah was an extremely terrible place where people just acted with no chesed and no love and treated each other disgustingly, and any guests would be killed as soon as they turned up and their money stolen from them. Right? That town was eventually taken away. Avraham Avinu lived at the same time, and he went against that. So he's spreading something which didn't really exist. These are new concepts, right? I mean, maybe they did exist, but he was reintroducing them. Okay. We know that Avraham Avinu had a Brit Milah, so we'll talk about that just for a few moments, because this Brit Milah, although it is a sign on his body, and we still, as parents, give that sign to our sons, however, it's a concept. That control in that area, right, of sexual immorality is going to be a major theme that's going to come up again and again and again. Okay? And Avraham Avinu was someone who was very careful with this area of relationships, of how he treated other people, and did not. Here, let's look at a source on this. Page 8, let's read this in the English, just to give a better understanding. This mitzvah Brit Milah that was given to Avraham. Now, the other mitzvot were not given to Avraham. Avraham was not given all the mitzvot. We're on page 8. He was not given all the mitzvot, right? But he was given some mitzvot. It must be the mitzvah he was given, he needed. The rest of the mitzvot were given to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, including the ones that were given to Avraham before. So some mitzvot were given earlier, and if they were given earlier, that means they were needed earlier to the people who received them. Yeah, it must be they were needed. The mitzvah Brit Milah is the covenant, which basically said means a promise, a Brit, between God and Avraham. Symbolically, the removal of the foreskin alludes to removing the layer of evil present in the world. That's what is the symbolism. Many commentaries make a direct connection between Brit Milah and faith, emunah, which we'll talk about, because Avraham Avinu is spreading faith, knowledge in God. That's an important word. Let's write that word down. Everything Avraham is doing is not just to be a nice guy. he's spreading God. Specifically, he's spreading emunah. You have to mention that word. We can't discuss Avraham and not discuss emunah. Has everyone heard the word emunah before? We translate it as faith. It's not faith. We're not a faith-based religion. The word emunah, a better translation is faithful. Faithful. Being faithful to God and to what you know and have discovered. There's a lot more to discuss on this, but I just mention it now in these early classes of our discussion. If you want to know what the opposite of emunah is, it's not the opposite. It's not the opposite. It's the expression of it. It's something called bitachon. Bitachon actually is better translated as faith. In short, emunah is being faithful in God from what you know, based on the past. Bitachon is having trust in God about things that haven't happened yet. That's the actual translation of these two important words. Emunah is building faithfulness in God based upon what you know, what you see, what you experience, Jewish history, and things from the past. That's emunah. Bitachon, we usually interchange these words, but they're two different things. Two very different things, actually. Bitachon is, I put trust in God about things that haven't happened yet. Emunah is, I'm going to be faithful towards God based upon what's happened in the past. Whether to me personally, or to Avraham, or to the Jewish people, or Mount Sinai. We'll talk about that experience. It's going to be a very important aspect to this. Yeah?
So when people say like, oh, like it'll all work out, or like have faith that like it'll come out.
They're actually meaning
that's not
they're
emunah,
actually talking
right?
about this.
Okay.
But this is based upon this.
Okay.
You really can't have this without this. It starts with emunah. Emunah, faith in God. Faith in God, which actually is based upon another word. Sorry to confuse you, but it's one more word. Is knowledge. Daled and dat is knowledge. You expect to know. Knowledge. Know there's a God. Dat leads to emunah, and emunah leads to bitachon. That's actually how it goes. We'll revisit these words and terms later on. I just want to give them to you now because they're important expressions we're going to hear a lot. Ultimately, we want to become ba'alei emunah, people of emunah, being faithful to what we know. It's like, I know smoking is bad. I know it because it says on the packet, smoking kills. It's not a secret. But am I faithful to what I know? We all know there's a God, I'm assuming. Are we faithful to that? Most Americans believe in God, right? People in the world believe in God. Are you faithful to that knowledge? That's a whole different thing. And do you trust? Put your trust in God that it's all going to be fine in the future and God's going to lead you in the right way, the right time, the right job, the right spouse, the right friendships, and whatever it is going to lead us to. That's the interplay between these three things. Dat, emunah, bitachon. Avraham was spreading emunah. Yeah. Question? Okay. So the Brit Milah was a symbol of this concept. Okay, fine. We did a lot today, wow. Just one last piece to close this all up. And it goes like this. We discussed Avraham and Sarah, and we're going to leave them now after this class. I mean, we'll come back to them, but there's a concept that is discussed in the Jewish sources, specifically the Ramban, Nachmanides. And he says, these stories of Avraham Avinu that we see in the Torah, and these principles of chesed, and how he attracted people to God, and how he treated other people, are not just nice, cute stories. And not only are they things that we should learn from, there's another thing that's happening here as well. They're not just nice stories about, oh, what a nice guy he was. And they're not just, oh, I should act like that, which we should. We were discussing it, right? You're going to be a student of Avraham. There's one other thing. One other thing which is its own thing and it's very important. And I'm going to write it in Hebrew. Please write it down. And I'm going to translate it and then we're going to explain it. Okay? And then we'll look at the Ramban to discuss. So once again, what are we doing over here? We're writing down an expression that the rabbis use to explain why we read stories and learn about Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Sarah and Rivka and Rachel and Leah and all the who we haven't met yet. We're going to meet them soon. What's that concept? Well, we did two already. Learn from them, see they did great things. Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim. Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim. Which means, I'm going to give you the literal translation, but that's not going to help you too much. But it's a concept. This is an idea that we need to know. Actually, it's really important. Without this idea, these stories of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and all the Avot and half the Torah don't really make too much sense, really. It's like we become like stories of legends and fables. There's a lot more happening over here, which most people are not aware of. Look very carefully. Maaseh Avot, the actions of our forefathers. Maaseh Avot, the actions of our forefathers and foremothers. Siman are a sign, lebanim, to their children, which means their descendants. Everything that happens in the Torah, all these stories, are not just things we should learn from, they're a sign of what's going to happen. Now that's a whole different thing. Not just nice stories you should learn from. The things that Avraham went through. I mean, there's an expression called history repeats itself. So it does, and we don't always want it to, and sometimes we do want it to when good things have happened. When it comes to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, these things are signs of what's going to happen in the future. Okay, let me explain what that means and why it's so important, because it's going to have relevance not just for the people who lived at the time of Avraham, or even the Jewish people who were created from his descendants 1,000 years later. It's going to apply to us and even to the arrival of Mashiach, which is the end of history, which we'll talk about at another time. Okay. So what's that? So we know that Avraham, for example, we know that Avraham went into Israel. He left Ur Kasdim in order to go into Israel, right? And then what happened? He left because there was a famine. He left and he went to Egypt. Sound familiar? Right. And they went from Egypt back to Israel. These things, to be fair, it's more of a deeper Kabbalistic but spiritual concept, but it is discussed by the Ramban. And he says, we know that Avraham went into the land to a place called Shechem, which still exists. And he says, I'm going to tell you a principle, that you'll understand all these stories of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which you're going to learn in your Bible classes and here too. He says there is a fundamental principle. Everything that occurred to our forefathers is a sign of what's going to occur to their children. Avraham had to deal with Avodah Zarah. We have to deal with it as well. It's going to happen. Avraham was put into exile. Where did we put into exile? Avraham was taken to Israel. Where did we take to Israel? Everything happened to him. It wasn't just like random stuff. that he had to deal with, which it was as well. It's also a sign, a siman lebanim, a sign of what the future is going to hold for his descendants. It adds a whole different spin, doesn't it? Suddenly the whole story is like, whoa, 1 second. You mean this isn't just like cute stories about, no. If Avraham dealt with it, we're going to deal with it. We're going to be dealing with this stuff too. Therefore, says the Rambam, this is not Rambam, not Maimonides, this is Nachmanides, who lived in Spain and Israel, two different people. Right? This is Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, who's a great rabbi, actually a great Kabbalist. His commentary is considered one of the classics on the Torah. He lived in Spain. He had a big dispute, right, over there, famous with the Christian, public Christianity, actually a Jew converted to Christianity. Eventually left and went to Israel, built synagogue over there, and died in the land of Israel. He wrote a very famous commentary on the Torah, right, Ramban, Nachmanides. Okay. So he says, this verses, these pesukim, these stories that tell us about our forefathers at great length, including all the journeys and the digging of wells. There's a whole story about digging of wells, that Avraham dug wells, and so the Yitzchak comes up again and again. It's like, what are these stories all about? He's like, don't worry. There's a moral aspect to these stories, but there's also a sign that stuff is going to happen to us in history that's going to actually be learned out from these stories. A person may think, why are they here? They don't have a purpose, says the Ramban. He's like, don't think that. Everything, all these things teach us about the future. For each event that happened to one of the forefathers is a nucleus, it's a seed of what's going to nigzar lezara to their descendants. This is why God kept Avraham in the land and brought upon him events. Everything was going to happen again in the future. So Avraham was shown what was going to happen in the future. We can look what happened to Avraham and be like, whoa, I know what we're dealing with. So we can learn from Avraham about how to handle stuff that we are dealing with as well, because it all repeats itself. It's a deep concept, but are you following it? I know it's a lot for a Tuesday morning at 9:30. I get it. But it's important. Okay. So that's Nachmanides. Yeah.
I have a question. How many times does it circulate back around? Like, does it happen once to the children and then...
So it happens, the ones he's describing is once. But there are many examples of this can happen again and again and again. Right? Avraham Avinu is fighting. We have exile, galut, happens to us a whole bunch of times. So all these things are repeating themselves again and again and again until Mashiach comes. Okay. And how he fits into everything we're going to see as well. But that's going to be the culmination. Really, we're from Avraham to Mashiach. Okay, but we're not there yet. We're just starting the story. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure this translates to the actions of our forefathers is a sign for us.
Really, it translates better to what happened to our forefathers. Masa avot, what happened to them. This is not the literal translation, but it's the explanation of it. Is a sign of what's going to happen to us in the future. And he's just given a few examples, but there's tons more. There's tons more. I mean, one of the most famous ones we just mentioned is exile. Avraham spends his entire life schlepping around. The Jewish people are going to spend their times schlepping around the desert, 42 times in the desert. They're going to go into Egypt, out of Israel, into Israel, temple destroyed out of Israel. All of this comes from these events.
Avraham was exiled
Yeah. Yeah, he was in Israel, he had to leave.
because of the famine.
Yeah. Very difficult. Famine, the famine that was there. Says the Torah, look inside, page 9, and we'll finish their questions after this. And then next class we'll talk about God. Might as well, right? Sounds weird, right? But that's the next, because that's Avraham selling. Says the Torah, Ki edativ l'man she'etzavet banav, number 9, page 9, top source, because I loved him, because he commands his children and his household after him. They keep the way of God. Itzavet banav, vet beito acharav, v'shamru derech Hashem. Avram kept the way of God. the way he acted, the way he treated people, right, is called Derech Hashem, the way of God. So whatever he did is good. Somehow it's going to affect your connection to God. La'asot tzedakah, he did tzedakah. Tzedakah doesn't mean charity, it doesn't only mean charity, it means justice, doing the right thing to the right people at the right time. Mishpat, and judgments. Laman havi Hashem al Avraham et asher diber alav. So that God could bring upon Avraham everything that he promised him, because God made a lot of promises to Avraham Avinu, including the land of Israel, including giving the Torah to his descendants. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to his descendants. I'm going to this may be from left field, but there is one verse from the book of Isaiah, which you've all heard without realizing it. But it started with Avraham, and it's going to continue right to the end of history. Let's look at this verse from Isaiah. Isaiah is a prophet that lived way afterwards, that had a lot to say about the end of days. He says, quoting God, I am God, I've called you with righteousness, with tzedek, just like Avraham. I'm going to strengthen you, I'm going to protect you, and you're going to be or goyim, a light unto the nations. Never heard that expression before. A light unto the nations. An important expression. You may be wondering why I'm bringing this quote down from someone who lived way afterwards. But it's important. Because this is what Avraham started. And this is what we're still trying to get involved in. I'm not saying we've been so successful at it. But this is the mission that Avraham started, that everything we've been doing since that point is we're trying to be a light unto the nations. Or unto. We're going to be a light. It's a fancy way of saying we're going to be a light for the nations. But it's more than that. It's more than that. Unto them means we're going to bring light to the nations. Bring light to them. Or we're going to be a light for them. What light are we talking about? We're going to sell light bulbs? We're flashlight business? LEDs? What light is the prophet talking about? What light, I'll give you a clue, did Avraham bring into the world? Kindness, belief in God, emunah. We're bringing light. Doesn't mean literal light. We're not going around with candles, although we do light candles, right? As symbols of this at different times of the year, especially Hanukkah, by the way. Well, that's another discussion. But the light over here is a spiritual light to illuminate the world. Our job, Fira, is to bring light to the world. What light is that? The light of God. Actually, the word Torah, we'll see, though it doesn't exist at this point, has Orah encoded in it. Torah, Orah. The Torah is light. What does light do? It shows you the way. It illuminates. It gives you vision. It directs you. So the Torah is going to... Now, Avraham Avinu didn't need a Torah. I don't know why, but he didn't need it. Right? He wasn't given the Torah. We're going to need it in order to fulfill our mission. But it's the same mission that Avraham had. He just had it in a different form. But it's the same mission that Avraham Avinu had.
Wait, the light is
Or, yeah. Torah is related. The rabbis say, and Orah, el Torah. Torah and Orah go together. Torah, Orah. Torah, Orah. The word Torah literally means teachings. Right? Horah is to teach. But encoded in that word is light. Because we bring light. Right? As represented by a candle.
Even in the Middle East, Israel is the light.
Doing a great job, yeah. 1000%. for the entire world it's meant to be, not just that the Jewish people are meant to be that light. Where we go, we bring light, we bring Torah, we bring emunah, we bring kindness. This is who we are. This is our mission. This is the core mission. Yeah.
Who did you say said Masa was?
That was the Ramban. Nachmanides, the Ramban. We looked at his source inside.
Who was the other guy? Ramban?
Rambam Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, right? The Mishnah Torah, we've discussed him. This is the Ramban. It's like Rambam and Ramban.
So Rambam was which one again? The one, like, I get confused.
You'll get it.
Okay.
He wrote the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam, Maimonides, all the laws, and the Ramban did not write the laws. He gives us philosophical understandings. The Torah actually did bring down laws actually elsewhere.